My guest today is Miles Neale. He is a psychotherapist. He's written a new book called Return with Elixir, and I've been passing through it. And I got to tell you, the guy's got his hand on a lot of really important material. And what makes this book fun is he kind of went through his own journey, came out on the other end, and has a whole bunch of contemplative material that I think is a good read. He is a psychotherapist, psychology instructor, and he's written two books, one called Gradual Awakening, and he's co-editor of Advances in Contemplative Psychotherapy. And would you believe he's coming to us today from Bali, Indonesia, which is an amazing place. So we want to find out what he has come up with, how he has passed through the fire and come out, and what we're going to get. So Miles, welcome to Destiny. Great to have you on the program.
Oh, thanks so much, Cliff. I'm delighted to have a conversation with you. Things, podcasts like these, high caliber podcasts and experienced interviewers. What excites me most is you just never know what labyrinth door and passageway we'll enter into. So I'm very excited. I've been a big fan and follower of your work, and so I'm so honored to sit with you and have a chat and see where our journey takes us.
Gotta ask you, you're from Manhattan. What the heck are you doing in Bali?
Well, it's partly listening to the soul, as I write in my book,
Yeah.
and partly it's because I have two kids, and so I think I was reading the tea leaves, and things in the United States are going through its own Saturn return, which is
Mm.
an astrological phase for a deep reckoning. And with all the costs rising and the sort of paralysis and sort of polarization and just the politicization and all the rest of it, I was really looking for a new start, basically, and to give my kids an international exposure,
Yeah.
which I had growing up. I was born in Singapore and raised in Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong for 18 years, and I did a whole long and lengthy chapter of my education and my career in New York City. And by the time we hit the pandemic, my radar was up for a new start. So that's the short and very comfortable answer.
That's such an exotic place, but it's also very tranquil and ancient in many ways too. And after reading a lot of your book, I can get a sense that you're this ancient soul that kind of had a need to go back to home base in a way and kind of absorb the energy of an ancient place like that.
That's very true. I mean, deep soul is something I'm oriented towards.
Hmm.
I've done a lot of traveling in my life, and a place speaks to us. It can resonate at a kind of vibration that either aligns with us or not. And so when I go to places like Greece, for example, I mean, I can feel my DNA spinning at a different rate, and I just know there's something here. And Bali is one of those places too. It's not without its own challenges, of course. It's not like a paradise. But it is offering something that was missing and necessary for this sort of new chapter of my life.
Hmm. Interesting. The book Return with Elixir feels like a cathartic release to me from your soul. Talk about writing the book, and it feels like a journey to me, but I'd like to hear from you exactly why you decided to write the book, but also what happened in the process of writing the book.
Yeah, Cliff, thanks so much for that. It strikes to the heart of the inner narrative of Return with Elixir. I mean, it's a book about multiple maps. It's a book or a kind of mythopoetic guide for people who are doing a reboot or reset or rebirth in their own life. But it really grew out of my own sort of breakdown and breakthrough, if you will. It was really, I would start this way. In contrast to my first book, Gradual Awakening, Return with the Elixir was about a very deep listening. I mean, the first book, 25 years I spent as a teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, and I was really trying to do some integrative work, presenting a 14th century text on Tibetan Buddhism that was the roadmap or cookbook to awakening. And so it was really kind of an intellectual exercise. How could I take old material and synthesize it in a new way, start to finish, the Tibetan Buddhist path?
Mhm.
Return with Elixir was a turning inward. and a really a sort of a deep listening to my own personal experience. And it was a crossroad. It was a turning point for me because in a way, I had established myself in New York City as a therapist. I had a niche working with yogis and contemplative people and people interested in the meditation movement, spiritual, people who wanted to work on psychology and spirituality at the same time. And I was very content, two kids, nice house in Westchester. It was kind of like the pinnacle of a career. I couldn't have asked for anything more, but something was amiss, something was off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I started having visions. And, I don't say that lightly because I don't want to come across as sort of a prophet or whatever. I actually write in the book that I think many of us have kind of visionary experience or dreams, potent sort of synchronicities, and we kind of just dismiss them because we live in a very sort of banal kind of clinical, dry,
Yeah.
disenchanted world, as Rick Tarnas might put it. But for me, I started really orienting to these intuitions and these visions. And in a way, I later learned through Jung that those intuitions was really kind of the soul's compass, my soul's compass.
Hmm.
And then somewhere along the line, I hit a really nasty ordeal, what Joseph Campbell might call the kind of sort of 6 o'clock moment, just a terrifying, debasing, absolutely soul destroying moment, which I write in the book. It had to do with a sort of betrayal in a spiritual community with my personal teacher, who I'd been serving and had been an apprentice and a mentee of for some 20 years. And it really did destroy me. And in my efforts to try to reclaim my life and piece it all together, I went on a long adventure and I just documented it. And
Mm.
so Return with Elixir is part map, multiple maps actually, but it's also just a way of chronicling and tracking my own journey into dissolution, and I really want to emphasize that I have this sort of recollection because people ask me, I've been a teacher of Tibetan Buddhism for a very long time. I've been a psychologist for equally long. How did your practices help you when you were in an
Yeah.
absolute crisis? And I want to be honest about it. The fact of the matter is nothing worked. Nothing worked in the sense that nothing held me together. Nothing kept me above water. And there was something in all of these traditions that I think is, if there's one take home from the book, whether it be yoga or Tibetan Buddhism or astrology or Jung or alchemy, the esoteric or the mystical traditions all are saying something very similar, that you can't raise or rise to the summit without doing an underworld journey, without going to the depths
Yeah.
without being obliterated.
Yeah.
So to say, when people ask me, how is you have such a big toolkit, you have so many things to draw on. I say, no, none of them worked because that's the nature of a real true crisis of the soul.
Yeah.
You are destined to absolutely become obliterated. And not many people like to go there, and they definitely don't like to talk about it.
I would like you to talk just a brief moment about the panic attacks that led you as kind of a kickstart to move beyond your work and give up your practice, number
Yeah,
one. But the thing that I'm also interested in, if you are anointed in this Eastern philosophy where you're meditating, you're doing perhaps yoga or some form of movement, why that wasn't helpful enough for you to say, okay, I can stabilize myself here. What it seems to me was happening was that you were transforming or you had had enough. And you write about this. And we're going to
yeah,
talk about this in a minute, how younger people are not able, because they don't have the tools, to transform and move beyond the personal crises that a lot of people are having right now. But I want to hear from you real quickly.
yeah. A great question, Cliff. Thank you. I think it's a clash of paradigm, what you're asking, because if you look, and it's not just you, it's the way that you frame the question has some underlying assumptions, not the least most important of which is if you have a toolkit, you should be able to stabilize yourself. And if you don't have a toolkit, then you're a mess or you're vulnerable. So the underlying assumption is that we should be able to overcome us handle it, or man up, or become so resilient, or as Dave Asprey calls it, become bulletproof. It's part of our ethos, especially in an American culture, that we could become Iron Men and women. We should be transcendent. So to go back a little bit, you asked me about panic attacks, and I could be very transparent about it. I was in an office building in Manhattan where I was receiving my psychotherapy clients. I'm on like the 10th or 11th floor. I can't remember now. It's been so long, and it's part of my past life narrative. I can hardly remember anymore. But, Manhattan is a congested place, and it spins at a certain kind of vortex that
Yeah.
makes you feel absolutely like you're chasing your tail. And it's no longer a 9 to 5. It's like a 7 to 8 ordeal every day. And everything is confined and everything is constricted. And the world was spinning at such a pace that, like, come Monday morning, journeying from one box in a moving box to my office box, and then most importantly, feeling that the world view that I was in was a kind of restrictive, confining box, and
Hmm.
having neck up conversations with people about the problem, the sort of what Freud called the working well. I started having panic attacks because I felt very confined. I
Uh,
was I was feeling very limited, not only by my space, but also by my profession, the confines of my profession. Insurance companies pay for 8 sessions. You're supposed to do therapy just this way. You're supposed to move people out of crisis so that they can get back to work as quickly as possible.
mhm.
And all of that just became too confining. And so, in a way, if I had gone to a psychiatrist and gotten some medication, or if I was so called just doing my meditation practice just right, what would have inevitably happened is I would have just been anesthetizing myself
Yes.
and keeping myself bound in a paradigm or of invisible prison. And I liken this to, like, if you sprain your ankle and your body is giving you signals not to bear any weight on it, but you bandage it and you take some sort of painkillers,
Right.
you're denying yourself important information from a deeper part of your being that's trying to orient you to something, a new horizon. And so for me, the panic attacks weren't a symptom to be ameliorated. And this goes back now to the bigger question that you pose. Panic attacks for me were a soul's beckoning. It was a call to adventure. It was some part of my soul recognizing, like, I had reached the tail end of this kind of edifice of a life that I had constructed over 20 years. I had some success. I was doing publications. I had a nice cushy job. I had a steady stream of clients. My kids lived in a nice house in Westchester. It was all the kind of accoutrement of a decent life. And I have nothing, no bad things to say about it. But it was the end, Cliff. And that end started it's the floor beneath me started to shake, and the edifice of this construction of deck of cards started to erode. And in a way, I have to say, it was a mirror for what I think all of us are experiencing in civilization right now. There are telltale signs. The so-called panic attacks of civilization are amidst us. And rather than ducking and burying our heads like ostriches in the sand and getting on with business and just, being ultra distracted or ultra polarized or ultra, spoon-fed propaganda, I think we have to register that something deeper is afoot and allow ourselves to follow a deeper calling during this monumental moment. So that was happening both on an individual level for me, and nothing is going to stem the tide, is my point, whether we're talking a collective or we're talking an individual. It doesn't behoove us to find a tool to kick the can down the road and stabilize.
Right.
What the esoteric traditions are saying, and what I try to recapture in my book and recount in my book, is go with the disillusion. Surrender to the disillusion. There is another world waiting for us. Let's not hold on to this one, which is barely working.
But if you surrender and you don't have the tool, because I've been meditating for 30 years and I understand where you're coming from. I use meditation as a governor, also a way to balance what's going on. it's not always a solution, but I'm interested to hear from you because you write very succinctly about our youth feeling apathetic, feeling depressed. My son is dealing with depression now. He's only in his early 30s.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling for him because he's
Yeah.
successful, but he is hypersensitive to society's activities right now. And as a psychotherapist, I'm interested to hear from you
Yeah.
as we proceed into this journey that you had, what you were seeing perhaps in your practice that was
Yeah.
triggering you. Because if you're seeing people who are in despair and apathetic, it's like, what the hell? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry as a father to hear that it's a hard road to watch your son go through difficult times. Okay.
Yeah,
And since he has success, you can't question it. It's not his ability or his will. Okay. I don't mean to analyze your son, just I mean to empathize with you and empathize with anyone listening that has close ones who go through this. But to highlight what I'm really suggesting is you have choices. You could send your son to a therapist, you could send your son to a psychiatrist, you could find some sort of symptom relief. And as a parent, I would never judge that because your heart is being pulled. You want the best for him, you want him to thrive.
right,
But but what if it wasn't about maintenance? What if it was actually something inside the youth of today is registering an awareness that the edifice of the civilization that they have been bequeathed is at its tail end. And we're
right.
actually all undergoing a death process. And we're in a very specific time period where the old is collapsing. That much we know. The new one has yet to emerge. And so you and me can sit here and go, young people don't know if it's worth going to college, if AI is going to steal their job, if there's anything after that $250,000 in school debt that's ever going to give them a payout. If and everybody seems to be absolutely invested and hijacked by propaganda and news media. They're hooked to their cell phones. They're addicted out of the gate. There's a lot to be unhappy about and a lot to be worried about and a lot to be concerned about. And there's a heavy burden on people growing up right now that certainly your generation didn't have. My parents' generation enjoyed a whole run where they could envision a life of a stable home, an income with a corporation that gave them a pension, a
Right.
white picket fence with two kids. We don't live in that world anymore. I'm of a generation where I enjoyed most of my career. I enjoyed that kind of stability and predictability. People coming up right now do not have even a year-long vision out. They can't do it because so much of the landscape changes. So, what is it in us that says that symptoms that you describe your son as having aren't absolutely appropriate for a sane person?
Exactly.
Absolutely appropriate. We don't, the sands underneath our feet are shifting. We don't know what the horizon line looks like. We're scared out of hell. We feel alienated. We feel a lack of meaning and purpose. Why go to a mechanized institution and get spit out 4 years later where you're absolutely unprepared for the future? Young people know this intuitively, and then we look at them with care and concern as parents, and we give them advices that we would have been given for an older time that no longer works.
Hmm.
So what I'm suggesting is, yes, there could be real cases where clinical depression maybe really warrant someone needs a stable ground for a minute. I'm not whitewashing and generalizing every case. What I'm suggesting, though, is to open the parameter from this very narrow clinical symptom management type of presentation. Like, oh, you have symptoms here. If we could just ameliorate the symptoms, we could get you back to work, and you'll have a perfect life. What I'm saying is there's a spiritual or an existential underpinning, which is it's sort of listening to your soul that says, he was listening and he translated it as, I don't fit in this world,
Yeah.
or this world doesn't make sense?
Right.
What if it had a language and it was whispering in your ear and he was saying something like, there's no place for me here? Then what would be the remedy is listen and acknowledge, and instead of divide him against himself, where there's kind of like an underlying judgment, there's something wrong with you. What if it was, no, there's something absolutely attuned with you, and we have to work together to help recreate the environment so that's more suitable to your journey instead
Mm.
of the other way round. So it beckons a series of further questions. It's different kinds of questions, and these are the kinds of questions I was asking myself on my own personal journey. It wasn't like, how can I make my self feel better? It's what is my soul really trying to tell me? And that's a completely different. The question, just like in a scientific experiment, sets up the entire experiment and
Mhm.
determines what kind of results you get. So these esoteric traditions are suggesting that maybe some of these symptoms are bang on. Maybe there's a part of our being that isn't just intellectual, it's intuitive and it's deeper than that. It's registering that we're living in a crisis situation. It's asking us to go through the crisis in a particular way. Maybe there's nothing wrong with us per se as human beings. Maybe we're registering that the environment is undergoing a dramatic cataclysmic shift,
Mhm.
and we have to go with that current through the other side. And part of that might mean a hell of a lot of very scary letting go.
That's great. Yeah. I you write that these strains are what you consider the collapse of society, ecology, the economy, and geopolitical problems or geopolitical unrest. That's a lot for the younger generations to handle. And we've been through it. I'm in my 60s and I'm able to deal with it a little bit better, or I try to ignore it.
Yeah.
But somebody who's a magnet to this information, who needs to hear about these societal changes, may not be able to release it quite in the same way that we do. And you made some great points about Eastern philosophies and these tried and true programs and practices that help buffer these problems. If someone is not able to accept an Eastern philosophy like we have, what are their options?
Well, this is where I don't disparage sort of the clinical use of meditation or anything like that. I think it serves a kind of purpose. What I'm suggesting is if we open the telephoto lens, there are multiple options. For someone who's really destabilized and maybe can't handle a deeper, dark night of the soul journey. I mean, in a way, I'm putting this to you so that your listeners have options. In a way, if it's a true dissolution or dark night of the soul, by definition, our tools won't help. But if it's short of a true dark night of the soul, yes, it's possible that community, places of safety and refuge, practices for self-regulation, which meditation and yoga are wonderful at. These are natural and natural medicines and natural remedies. And sound, music, art, literature, these all can serve as bastions of support and inner reliance, what are called inner refuges. They create safety. It's all about the sense of coherence and safety when you're feeling fragmented.
Right.
The best one that is recommended by our human design, we overlook all the time. And in fact, we're having the biggest influx of disruptor. It's an actual face of somebody else in proximity that's more regulated than us.
Hmm.
By design, we have facial recognition, we have a vagus nerve that regulates our neural pathways and our ability to regulate our emotions. If we're just in the presence of someone who has some level of self-regulation, some level of kindness and empathy, offers a calm demeanor and a soothing voice, the sound of a soothing voice. If we, and the wonderful thing for people who want to take that role, may it be parents, for example, spouses, partners. The trick and the key and the wonderful liberating thing about this is you don't have to do anything. You don't have to fix a problem. 10 minutes of being with somebody with an open heart and a calm demeanor and a present face is enough to help someone come from disequilibrium back online to find their own vibration
Wow.
of stability.
Hmm.
And this is a wonderful gift that we can give each other that we forget in an era of disruption, and we're all distracted and we're more focused on our phones than on the human presence aspect. So it is like a gift. And I think the burden that we often too often fall into as partners, spouses, in our relations, we go for the problem solving.
Hmm.
And we don't go for enough of the presence. And you can never problem solve anyway if you're dysregulated and fragmented. So, really, to help someone learn how to cope with their reality, they have to shift from being dysregulated into wise mind, into reclaiming their nervous system. And the only thing that we have to do is just be willing to be with them in their state of distress. And of course, the problem is when we see someone in distress, especially someone we love, what happens to us?
Yeah. Throws us off too.
It throws us off. So the whole mechanism goes topsy-turvy. So if we can just remember, actually, the gift that I have to give is my own calm nervous system. Someone's just going through a wave in the ocean. If I just sit with them long enough, we'll pass through that current together. I'm free of the burden of trying to fix them. They can fix themselves or learn how to fix themselves or learn how to tinker with the bigger picture of reality. And we're just surviving a tumult here. That can be a really big learning lesson for both the receiver and the giver.
I'm kind of translating that to mean somebody who might be grounded and maybe
Some,
isn't
yep.
really kind of chaotic and wanting to know what the hell was going to happen next and not really having any balance.
Yeah, it's emotional and it becomes cognitive too. So yes, I mean, if you feel emotionally grounded and in your body and your nervous system and you remain calm and connected, let's say there's
Mhm.
it's not just you're also connected, which means you can empathize with somebody without getting overwhelmed by their distress. This is what
Right.
therapists and first responders learn. They learn how to be available without getting overwhelmed. Now, part of their mechanism could be to shut things off, and we don't want that. So, if you walk into your doctor's office or you walk into a trauma surgery or you walk into you sometimes get first responders who learn to be present without being empathic.
Mhm.
Now, I'm sure your listeners and you and I have had that experience of walking into a doctor's office where we're just like meat on the conveyor belt. It's like 2 minutes, but how do you stay connected with someone and empathic without getting overwhelmed by whatever's happening in their bit of reality? That's an art. But that art, if we were to learn and we were to extend as a gift to our loved ones, would go a very, very long way. Now, just to orient, we're still talking about coming short of a true dark night of the soul. Like, how can we be effective? How could you work with your son? How could you stabilize people that aren't willing or ready to be on a long-term, very, very deep spiritual journey of disintegration, voluntary disintegration? That's the bigger question. This is more of a kind of a smaller question: is how do I just survive the ebb and flow of such and flux of such a rapid change? Well, we really need to stick together, and we could all afford to learn some very basic co-regulation, deeper empathy, enhance, just as AI is booming, enhance our human empathy and our deep social emotional intelligence. It would go a long way.
Mhm. I want to get into system vibrations like the yugas, but before I do that, you use the term pilgrimage quite a bit in your book, and this is an important key that I found that I have fallen into when I mean, I need to get away. I need to go to another country or another area, or I'm here in California, so I have a lot of landscape that I can go and do a vision quest. But why are pilgrimages so important when we're trying to release not only trauma, but perhaps realign?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of my favorite questions. Pilgrimage is has become front and center my new form of therapy. So I did 25 years of conventional therapy. Then I started integrating Buddhist techniques, and then I started integrating Jung. But I've crossed a Rubicon entirely now, where I view pilgrimage as a therapeutic intervention, and people think I'm nuts for that. But it's worthy of exploration. I mean, there are many kinds of pilgrimages. In the Tibetan tradition, there are at least three types or categories of pilgrimage. One is the outer pilgrimage to a sacred destination.
Mhm.
One is an inner pilgrimage. It is a journey into the inner landscape of one's mind, into the labyrinth of one's mind, if you will. And the third is called the secret pilgrimage, and that has more to do with the pilgrimage of aligning your internal vibration and energy, prana. So it's an energetic, it's an esoteric pilgrimage. It's considered secret or tantric because if you monkey around too much with that kind of energy system without the right initiation or support, you could actually hurt yourself.
Right.
So those three pilgrimages are beautiful opportunities. They are all defined by one principle. They're disruptors of ordinary reality. So when you ask me what purpose does a pilgrimage serve, people think of pilgrimages in terms of a kind of travel. Well, the way that we travel these days, actually, most of us look for comforts. If you're working hard, Cliff, and I'm working hard, we want to come to Bali and we want to put our feet up and we want to sit with, we want to relax in the swimming pool with a nice drink and some, smoothie bowls as we overlook the ocean. But that's not a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage in a true sense, if it's really worked well, first of all, it's answering a deeper call. It's not the call of where can I find a respite? Where can I have a moment of, a break from my reality so I can recharge, so I can go back to the rat race. It's a disruptor. A disruptor of what? It disrupts everything from your ordinary routine to your mentality, how you see the world, your worldview, to your own identity, the way that you hold yourself and see yourself in the world. A true spiritual pilgrimage is designed to disrupt the ordinary routine and the centrifugal force or the gravitational pull of your ego identity. And so, for me, why it's so therapeutic is we live in a culture where we try to gather all the accoutrement oriented mostly by ego boosting. How many likes, how many fans, how good am I doing? How slender am I? How many what's my accolade? It's and comfort. We're also an extremely comfort oriented civilization, and we have done incredibly well at doing this. We have the highest tech. You can walk into a smart house where your car and your house know exactly the perfect temperature that's going to be
Right.
perfect for you so you can sleep and have a beautiful meal on delivery and put your tootsies up and watch the television and anesthetize yourself. Pilgrimage is designed instead to absolutely disorient and disrupt and to change the value system.
Hmm.
Maybe the world isn't just about me. Maybe the world isn't just about collecting. Maybe the world isn't just about comfort. What are some alternatives? Well, the ancient traditions had a different paradigm and worldview, and pilgrimage was situated within those worldviews and acted as a kind of crucible or a method for realizing different kinds of qualities and different kinds of attributes and having different kinds of experiences. So, for example, in the Buddhist tradition, a pilgrimage is about awakening.
Hmm.
Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Let's go on a pilgrimage for awakening. Well, you can't have awakening without having what's called, and these are more archaic terms, and we can find updated terms for them. A pilgrimage, at least in the Buddhist tradition, is defined by two things: the orientation towards a spiritual destination in with the aspiration to awaken your mind. Sounds wonderful. How is it done? It has two wings, just like a bird that flies. One of it is called purification, and the other one is called accumulation. So, what you're trying to do is you're trying to disrupt the status quo of your identity, which is fixated on meanness and comforts, and it has a whole structure of defense mechanisms and avoidance patterns that wants to look at the kind of ugliness inside of you and the hedonic urges and the aggressive urges. When you go on pilgrimage, and why it's therapeutic is that you work on taking a healthy look at yourself and taking responsibility for those impulses that are actually creating your and other people's dissatisfaction, having an honest inventory and accounting and wanting to work on that. So if you don't like the word purification, which comes out of old world kind of archaic language, even though it's right there in psychedelics, you could look at it in terms of processing. You could be
Mm.
working on processing trauma, processing grievances, processing places where you're stuck, processing places where your routinized sense of identity is calcified, processing knee-jerk reactions and impulsivity. What's the other side of it? Accumulation. Don't like that word? What about acculturation or cultivating good attributes, cultivating open-heartedness, cultivating resilience, cultivating generosity, cultivating patience, all those attributes that would actually help your sense of self extend, expand, become more resilient, become more empathic, become higher IQ. Then all these things together, the deterioration or the dismantling of the old structures, the building of the new based on this ethos of awakening, then you can see that this is an intervention.
Yeah.
This is the old world's remedy for the dark night of the soul, but short of the dark night of the soul, this is a way of transformation. Pilgrimage is a literal transformation in motion. It's not just transformation on your meditation cushion. It takes advantage of the fact that as you orient towards spiritual destination, and you've gone to many, whether it be Egypt or Peru or Nepal or Bali, there's something in these sacred sites. Just a few months ago, I was on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. Okay, this is a 1,000-year-old pilgrimage route that heads towards Santiago de Compostela, where there is um, um, a grand a cathedral there, chapel, that houses the relics of Saint John, or is it Saint James? I can't remember exactly, but either way, one of the top three disciples of Christ. And so, all of that, what does that mean? It means for 1,000 years, pilgrims made great efforts walking, in some cases barefoot, in some cases with very sparse conditions, in some cases through torrential weather, in some cases for many months along a route in order to process their, at that time in a Christian metaphor, in a Christian ethos, it was in order to atone for sin, but also to connect with the divine and to accentuate and amplify their devotion. And
Mm.
so what happened is that over a month or 3 months or 6 months, however long it took them to get to their destination, they were actively and voluntarily engaged in a process of self-transformation. By the time they hit the destination of Santiago de Compostela, they had already transformed. It wasn't just the arrival at that place. Although if you go to Abydos or you go to Dendera or you go to Machu Picchu or you go to Budgaya, those places are filled with power. They have a long legacy. They have a collective ethos of shared energy and vibration. You
Yeah.
could feel it in the ground. I have this really interesting observation on my Camino de Santiago pilgrimage, which I want to share with you because I was actually absolutely blown away. I had a group of 20 people join me for this long trip. We were going 100 miles in 2 weeks, which is approximately 12 to 15 miles, 7 to 8 hours a day of walking. These were people who I had no connection with. They were complete strangers when we started. When we ended, it was a completely different picture. But one of the observations I had, which was incredible, was that by the first quarter of the trip, half of the cohort were experiencing or were deepening past life regression, past life memories. And
Hmm.
I wasn't anticipating that. But I put two and two together and I thought to myself, no, yes, of course we can say that this is a self-selected group of people who had volunteered for a spiritual pilgrimage. But on the other hand, there's something about the path. There's something about the terrain in which thousands and thousands and thousands of oriented pilgrims over centuries have imbued that space with a kind of energetic charge that when you go with the right right intention, something shifts inside of you that might not happen if you're just at your local cafe in France or your therapist's office in New York City or at the beach in the Bay Area. It might not happen because those places don't have the same kind of energetic charge. This
Right.
might, I've never been to Egypt, but since you have a lot of people that are interested in Egypt in your fan base, you can't deny that going to those places has a kind of energetic signature all of its own. Well, what happens to the human psyche in those places? Something very deep and unpredictable is touched and is amplified and is augmented. And so, what if you go with a spiritual intention, open-minded? I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever happens has meaning.
Yeah.
Suddenly we were putting pieces together on long walks. I was almost doing psychotherapy at the back of the line with people who were, it was awesome. It was like people would come talk to me. There was no, and see, goes back to the question you asked me about being confined in New York City. I was confined by brick and mortar. I was confined by 45-minute sessions. I was confined to just getting people working well back to the office so they could come back into my box and out to their box and back to
Yeah.
my box. But here,
Band-aids.
band-aids. And here on the
Yeah.
Camino, I had hours of time, no pressure, an absolutely beautiful vista, a trail imbued with meaning of centuries, following a path oriented by a spiritual inclination. People would come and just converse with me, or I would converse with them, or they would converse with each other, and things were being activated, and they were oriented not to dismiss them as symptoms, as craziness, but as opportunities.
Mhm.
This is both the outer pilgrimage and the inner pilgrimage combined. The outer pilgrimage goes to a sacred destination which is imbued with all kinds of meaning and opportunity. You could get lost, and that could benefit you. You could find what you're looking for, and that could benefit you. It's all a matter of how you're oriented. But also an inner pilgrimage. What gets stirred up is not an obstacle, is an opportunity. Can you go deeper? Can you go deeper and deeper? Can you go deeper to the places that you're not familiar with, the places that scare you, the places that are unknown to you? Can you start listening to a new way instead of being oriented five senses outward? What about oriented five senses inward? What does the inner landscape have to teach us? These are all the questions about pilgrimage, which I'm so fascinated with. I'm taking so much of your time. I'm
No,
not
I love
including you in
this
the
story because
conversation.
I do tours every year, and I got one coming up in Guatemala that is dealing with shaman,
Mm.
and they're telling us that you need to set the intention ahead of time to set the setting.
Yes, and the dieta and the prescriptions for
Yeah.
before you even get on the trail or into the ceremony are part of the preparation, and they would fall into the Buddhist terminology of part of the purification starts early. So they may
Yeah.
ask you, of course, you know all this, but your listeners, they may ask you to change your diet, change your lifestyle, maybe abstain from sex, maybe routinize more your sleep pattern, maybe not interact in ways that are terribly aggravating or upsetting to your mind. What they're asking you to do is not only cultivate the outer conditions or circumstances for a breakthrough, but actually treat your inner environment as part of the remedy and recipe for awakening. And so a diet, a lifestyle change, an attitude adjustment. I love that attitude adjustment. We all need an attitude adjustment. They may happen may happen a month before you even set foot. So then when you get there and the shaman invites you into ceremony, you're well intended, you're well oriented, your body is receptive,
Right.
you've dissolved some of the obstacles already. You are and listen, it's not easy to do those things. When you change your diet, even if you stop using sugar or eating meat, and that's something familiar to you, what happens, Cliff? What happens to you? You get irritated, you get angry, you start having upsetting feelings, you have maybe it disrupts your sleep pattern, maybe it trigger. All of that is not secondary. That's part of the journey. How do you
Mhm.
show up for that? How do you relate to that? What does that teaching you? Maybe it's not all cognitive and maybe it doesn't all make sense, but your body is going through purification. The preliminaries for going to ceremony or going on pilgrimage, it doesn't necessarily need to make cognitive sense. We often are looking too much for an explanation. It can just be The body has an opportunity to throw off toxins. The psyche has an opportunity to throw off dreams, memories, traumatic patterns and habits, release energy. If we volunteer for that and it's held in a safe container, maybe it doesn't always make sense. I mean, trauma therapy, for example, you can have a shard of experience come up in a completely anomalous, unrecognizable way. You get a moment of anger and nothing in your immediate environment seems to be congruent with it. But if you understand it from a trauma lens, it's a release.
Mhm.
It's and if you can just allow that, something in your psyche is actually taking authority or ownership over your well-being and saying, okay, now is the time to let go of this thing so that you can expand who you are and reclaim parts or fragments of your being that you disavowed or let go of or couldn't handle when you were younger or in a different period or in a different context. This brings up a bigger question. Maybe we can pin it. But Jung had this wonderful thing to say about the psyche, which is that the unconscious is not your adversary. The unconscious is your ally. Wow.
Mhm.
Cliff, this was
Okay.
revolutionary for me, man. It was really revolutionary for me in my process. I'm a kind of guy that wants to know, wants to be in control. The world prized that. It made a scientist of me. I went to get a PhD. You did too. It's like the world tries to get you to be uber rational so that you can control your dominion.
Mhm.
And we learn some way through pop culture or other ways that the unconscious, what's inside of us, is a threat. Keep vigilant about this is definitely Freud. Keep vigilant about what's inside of you because it could upturn the apple cart. Jung had a different opinion about it. Jung was, no, the unconscious is like a deeper mind. It has a deeper knowing. It knows exactly when you're ready to have an upsetting moment because that's not designed to derail you. It's temporarily designed to disrupt you, to open you. And so Jung was always oriented towards what are these anomalous experiences, getting upset, being irritated, being angry? What is the unconscious trying to teach us? What if it takes you in a new direction? What if you have a massive breakup? And in my case, what if you have a massive betrayal? He would suggest that these are all happening for our benefit. And your son, for example, what would Jung say about your son's depression? He would say something like, maybe, just maybe he didn't put it in 100% guarantee, but just maybe, these symptoms are alerting your son to go on a bigger adventure, that his
Mhm.
culture has limited to him to this kind of bird path of going to high school, going to college, and getting a job. And he knows at some deeper level that's not going to work. And so why not take a year off and go to France or go to Peru? Or why not study something completely atypical and outside the norm? Why not
Right.
follow his intuition to learn how to sail around the world? Why not, go spelunking in some cave in southern France or learn agriculture in Bali? You and I would look at him and go, "That's crazy. You need to be prepared for a job." No, that world is gone. That
Yeah.
world is gone. So all I'm saying is Jung was really a master at really validating something deeper in our intuition about going on the journey, processing whatever comes up as food to nourish your soul. Wow, what a
Yeah.
great invitation. So I loved it so much when I first came into contact with that.
I want to stay into that same area and discuss which is where we go next, the living death and then the rebirth. In other words, not physically dying, but dying, I would think, one persona and cultivating a new persona.
Yeah.
That's the language I will use. You're more eloquent in your book on this whole process, but why is that so important?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, of course, we can start with the idea that the real death, the big D death, is inevitable for all of us.
Right.
Okay, so if I ask you, and since you do these great tours to engage with shamans and wisdom traditions, they all know this, and we forgot it.
Totally.
This, yeah,
Yes.
so they all know the secret to life is that it's cyclic. We actually think that life is linear and that somehow if we just, within the next 5 years, we're going to have secret AI pill that goes into our nervous system and gives us longevity. If we just we're going to biohack our way to longevity. We're staving off the inevitable. We don't see that life, you can't have life without death. You can't have joy without sadness. You can't have integration without fragmentation. The dualities always come together. Your shamans know this. They come from a culture that never lost this, or is,
Right.
even though modernity has made its impact on them, the pockets, the bastions of wisdom culture across the planet, whether it be in Bali or in Peru or in India, they still understand this. So one of the things about the big D death, there's also metaphoric death within a lifetime. Okay. And, given the astrology, we're also going through a civilizational death. This is another way it's important to us, you and me and your listeners. There is the civilizational death that we're amidst. If we go through it with the same kind of fear response and avoidance response and sort of hubris, it's going to crush us. If
Right.
we go through the big civilizational death with more of the wisdom eye or the third eye of the shamans or the wisdom keepers, it'll be a much more gracious death. Although it may be painful, it will have meaning, greater meaning, and we'll actually come out the other end all the better for it.
Right.
So there are little deaths across a lifetime. And then there's definitely a big one, a big D death at the end of a lifetime. Then there's the micro deaths, which is waking up and going to bed every day, or moments of your day, micro moments of your day could be little moments where you have these opportunities that we miss all the time for reclaiming gratitude, reclaiming awe, reclaiming compassion, reclaiming, vitality. If we just reset our mindset and our heart as many times as we reach for our phone in a day.
That's a trip.
But the most important thing for me is, yes, books like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, although both of these are probably not called that. That's the popular version. They're manuals for preparation.
Hmm.
They understood life is cyclic. They understand that how you go through a crisis and how you go through the doorway or the threshold is important, because once you're in between worlds, okay, and this is a metaphor, there is the death phase, there's what's called the liminal phase or the Bardo in Tibetan, and then there's the rebirth. The death phase, you have to go with the heart of surrender. You can't buttress and become rigid. Again,
Right.
in the face of death, you have to surrender. You have to actually use consciousness and breath and forgiveness to open and not contract during the stages of dissolution. Once you're in the liminal phase, which is a symbolic phase for incubation, they say there you're assailed by all your past traumas and also your past grievances and your past missteps,
Hmm.
your regrets. So, for example, in I've never been to Egypt, but there's iconography in Egypt of one of the gods holding a scale where a feather balanced, the feather of truth is balanced against all your negativities.
Right.
And the Tibetans have the same kind of imagery. And so it's a universal archetype amongst the wisdom cultures. And I'm sure in your shamans would have something similar, which is you can't outrun your past. You will have a moment of recognition and you will have a moment of revelation and you will stare nakedly into the mirror of your past deeds. And
Mm.
are you going to be ready for it? And Cliff, I get very animated during this moment because we're not only going to have to do that individually and clean up our damn mess, but we also have to do it civilizationally, which is happening right now. It's
Right.
happening right now, just as all the systems and institutions are breaking down. The underbelly, the ugliness of our centuries of hedonistic and imperialistic and misogynistic and exclusivity and all of that, all our desirous clinging and our reaping and raping the earth and pillaging other cultures, all of that is now coming full circle, and
Right.
we can't outrun it. There's no secret ivory tower that the rich folk are going to build in New Zealand that's going to exempt them from the destruction of their grandiose and asinine missions. And we're
Mhm.
all implicated and we're all complicit. And so that's the grand scale Bardo, which is if you can tolerate that and you can take responsibility for that and you can atone for that and you can learn from that, then there's also the treasure, which is that you also have an opportunity to redesign yourself, to use that learning as awakening fodder, to mulch it so that you can redesign yourself as more altruistic, more sensitive to the planet, a more egalitarian leader, a better father, a better husband, a better parent, whatever it might be. You can use that slap in the face. You could take one on the chin to orient you to how to do it better and how to redesign it. And if that's possible for an individual in the liminal space right before the reboot, it is also possible in the long scale for civilizations to equally do that, redesign civilization to be more aligned with the incoming energies of the incoming ages. So we're right now on a cusp of a transition between two ages. We
Right.
can hold on for dear life and try to mimic the economic, political, energy, medical sectors and institutions of the past because we're terrified of new innovation, and we will slam our heads into the wall, or we can let go gracefully, learn the powerful lessons of what didn't work so well, open to the deeper psyche and deeper intuitive knowledge of where the energetic signatures of the incoming age are, and go that way with the most open heart and decency. We need
Mhm.
decency and dignity and humanity as we orient towards the new civilization.
Yeah, I love that. We were talking about the Hindus' Kali Yuga, which is what we're in right now, the Yuga system, and my listeners are very well acquainted with the Yugas. How do we pass through it as elegantly as we can? And perhaps you can give us some suggested technique from your book that would, obviously, we want people to read your book, but when you're dealing with a transition as brutal as we're dealing with right now, where we have a political nightmare, we have ecosystems that are failing, we have an economy that's up in the air. This is tremendously disabling.
Yeah, and will be for
Yeah,
some time. Okay, so we're talking about I'm no expert on the Yuga cycle. I learned just enough in my book to weave it together with other maps of similar ilk. So in my book, I talk about cosmology as a infinite life cycle with its own epochs. I talk
right.
about Jung's model as a cycle of individuation in which you let go of one identity, fall into the dark night of the soul, and reclaim a larger identity. I talk about Joseph Campbell's mythopoetic cycle, which is a departure from an ordinary world into an unknown world so you can face a terrifying ordeal, but also reclaim a lost treasure and return back with a gift. And I talk about the Tibetan cycle, the Tibetan Buddhist cycle of death and rebirth, which is a soul's journey through the stages of dissolution at the time of death to enter into this bardo or liminal phase so that you can reboot yourself as an altruistic angel or avatar to come back to the world in a more purposeful way. All of these maps follow this one alchemical motto that I discovered across the 5 year writing of my book, which I want to share with your listeners and then return to the cosmological map because it underpins all these maps. And my hypothesis is it underpins many more maps, not just the four that I discovered.
Hmm.
This alchemical motto is called Salve e coagula. Salve is a Latin term that is a cognate for dissolve. Et means and coagula is the cognate for coagulation, which means to regenerate or to come back, to renew. And so this idea that you can't just jump to the high point of the mountain, you have to go through a dissolution. You can't just have new life without death. And I say it with a smile on my face. And I remember when I was going through the death process, and it was enough to make me cry. And as it might be you as a father to see your own son go through the dark night,
Hmm.
it's not a laughing matter. It's not a one night thing. It can be months, if not years. It can be, and for anyone listening, your dark night is your invitation to rebirth. but it makes it no less terrifying and no less painful. And I want to speak directly to your soul. You're not doing anything wrong. If it's painful and it's long and enduring and it's unbearable, it's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's it's this is how it is. This is how the journey goes.
Mm.
If you can just hold on, if you can just open even that little bit, if you can just accept the tumult, if you can just accept the fragmentation, if you can just accept the not knowing and the lack of ability to control your situation for one more day with a hint of faith in the larger enterprise that all of these wisdom traditions are telling us that life is cyclic and you will make it through to the new dawn.
Mm.
You won't fall into the abyss and be forever obliterated. It's an impossibility. Let go, let go, let go, noble one. The hour has come for your dissolution. The liminal doorway, this doorway into the liminality is here. Go through with a noble heart and learn. This is what the Tibetan Book of the Dead is encouraging all of us to do. It hurts like hell. It burns like fire. It's so disorienting. You don't even know who you are. But then in the midst of it, there, if you can just open, another voice will appear to you, just like in the psychedelic movement. The psychedelic is a microcosm of death. Your psychedelic journey of all your preparation for 1 month, you get to the shaman, you take the substance, whatever it might be, the medicine, and you go through the same dark night. You have to dissolve. You have to be confronted. You have to be assailed. You might not know who you are, where you are, why you are. And if you can just open that that is a huge teaching, a counter hubris teaching to open you to humility,
Mm-hmm.
then humility sheds you of all your knowingness. And maybe then some drop of wisdom from a deeper source can then fill your cup. But we don't want to let go. We want to know, we want to know, we want to be in control. We want to have it all together. So this is the invitation both at the large scale and at the individual scale. The Yuga cycle as a metaphor is saying that life is cyclic. We have reached from, if life was a clock of 24,000 years, 12 o'clock at the top and 6 o'clock at the bottom, the 6 o'clock is at the darkest night.
Mm-hmm.
And we have just, according to experts like Bibu Des Mishra, who you've had on your show, incredible expert on the subject, he basically recalculated Sri Yukteswar's from his Holy Science book, which is the book that I used as reference point. He's basically suggesting that sometime in May 2025, we cross a threshold.
Mm.
I don't mind so much whether it's here or there, to be honest with you, because I look at it as a construct, as a metaphor. I'm not trying to track it as precisely as Bibu, although I think it's important. But for me, all that's important is a couple of things: to alert my unconscious and your listeners' unconscious to the fact that time is cyclic and that we're on a great and long journey together as civilization. And we have reached our apex, our tipping point of decline. And we're actually on the upswing, which is an incredibly hopeful message we need to hear and we need to spread. Yes, the systems are dissolving. Yes, the institutions are fragmenting. Yes, we are all going to actually have to tighten our belts and lose our jobs. And the party is over. Okay. We have to know that. Your kids know it already, which is why they're symptomatic. But if they see it in terms of the bigger picture, it provides orientation, Cliff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just if you're too close to the trees, it just can be enough to destabilize you. But if you can take a big step back and see the long arc of the longer journey and see I'm a soul being reincarnated through time and space, and I happen to be born at a time where I'm at this absolutely pivotal, cataclysmic, and creative opportunity, then I have a place, I have a role to play here. Your kids and my kids have a role to play, and your listeners and you and me have a role to play, and you're doing exactly. See, you've been following, and I don't even know you, but I've your soul has been guiding you to broadcast these wisdom messages and take people on pilgrimages because it understood in this lifetime. And I don't know what you were in a prior lifetime, whether you were in marketing or you're CEO or something in entertainment. I don't know what it was, but something called you into this role. And now it's prophetic because now people need this content, this wisdom content. They need access to wisdom traditions. They need to go on a method of pilgrimage for disillusion and reawakening. And you're a wisdom keeper for that. You're a bridge. You're a bridge to old traditions. Your platform serves to amplify a message that is underlying it is a message of hope. Yes, we are in crisis, but there's a new dawn coming. And actually, we can't just be passive observers. We have to be active participants in it. That's the call. How do we be active participants in the reconstruction of a new world when we're talking about long time spans? So we're entering from Kali into Dwapara.
Right.
Okay, Dwapara is somewhere on the order of 2000, between 2,500 and 3,000 years. Of course, Bibu can give you the better math. I have the math in my
Yeah.
book, but again, I'm not so precise about it, not because I dismiss the precision. I'm just looking for swaths of mythopoetic interpretation. And so what I like to say to people is we're actually on the cusp of two transitions, not just the Kali Yuga, which there are four: gold, silver, iron, and bronze and iron, or dark, but also 12 epochs of the the precession of the equinoxes. Okay, and this is a transition between the Piscean age and the Aquarian age.
Right.
That's also, these two match each other perfectly. We're talking about the same long cycle of 25, about 24 to 25,000 years, but within it, cut differently. The yugas are cut into four. The astrological cycles are cut into 12. What's the importance of them? Well, the duration in which we are transitioning has a particular energetic signature. This is what's important. The Dwapara Yuga has a particular energetic signature. It is a time of, I would distill it this way, and this is not just me, this is Sri Yukteswar as my source, and also Jung knew this too. The age that we're heading into, which is on the upcycle from the dark night heading all the way back to the high point of civilization, Satya Yuga. Our technological prowess will far exceed our moral compass
Mm.
over the next 2,000 years. What we're trying to do is catch up morally to our technological ingenuity.
Mm.
So this is just one signature which your listeners can contemplate with the age of AI coming, and with the Kurzweil sort of moment of singularity amidst us in our lifetime, possibly.
Right.
And AI, general artificial intelligence, almost there, if not, depends who you talk to. We're talking about power we have never conceived of. But if you look at the yugas and you talk to people like Bibu and others that you've had on your show, they'll all say that since time is cyclic, there were past civilizations that had unbelievable powers,
Yeah.
unbelievable technologies. These are not new things. We had telepathy and we had, incredible actual machines. You go to Egypt and you can't explain how you constructed it. And you wonder on a linear map, how is it possible? Because we're brainwashed to think that people were primitive and now we're at the apex. Unbelievable hubris.
I
There were
know.
there were prior civilizations and people who had unbelievable, unfathomable capabilities, both internal and external, at their capacity. For us, Cliff,
Right.
for us, what we're trying to understand and how people can orient themselves is have hope. We have to move through this voluntarily and gracefully. We have to let go. It's going to get bumpy. We've enjoyed a long stint of stability, and now it's going to be unstable. We've enjoyed a long period of coherence, and now it's going to become fragmented. We've enjoyed a long period of, institutional marketing, but it's all a deck of cards. It's all a deck of cards. It's a bubble, and it's about to burst, and it's death, and death hurts, and there's no way around it. And there will be grieving, and there will be anxiety, and there will be unpleasantness, and there may be civil unrest, and all the rest of it is coming. But if you can breathe, and you can listen to the guidance of the wisdom keeper, and you can co-regulate in small pockets and small communities and local communities where you gather around higher intelligence, and you can open to this fact that what is being called and asked of us in this moment is make your life an instrument of ethics. That is now here's one analogy I'd like to offer your listeners. When the big megalithic builders and builders of the great cathedrals of Europe in the Middle Ages were building, the stonemasons would have a vision of a temple or church or cathedral that would last 1,000 years, that they would never see the end of. They would never see the fruit of their labor, but they built nonetheless. They put stone together, and maybe a generation would die off and a new generation would come in to complete the project.
Hmm. Right.
And that is a great metaphor for you and me raising our kids. We are coming through the threshold now. One epoch is dying, another one is emerging. Technology will far exceed our moral compass. Each of us is being called to become more authentic, genuine, aligned with virtue. We will be the foundation builders of a new civilization that we won't be around in this form to witness, but
Hmm.
we will bequeath that to our heirs and to our own souls to reanimate or to re-inhabit. And so ethics is our strongest play. Clean up your life, have moral integrity. I say, most people, when they take the wide angle view and they see the institutions collapsing, they see the ecological system collapsing, they see the absolute, hypocrisy and corruption in governments. There's no one to trust anymore. It's, 15-minute cities and everybody's trying to overstep and overreach and control us. The propaganda over the airwaves and the deep deception is only going to get more tenacious.
Hmm.
Deep deception. And how do I know that? I know that because the Aquarian age has at least 4 signatures that I write about in the book. If you want to orient yourself properly to the future, the first thing that we need is to understand that we're going from a pyramid to a mandala. Decentralization is one of the archetypes or the energetic signatures of the incoming age. It means that this whole thing of like Trump on top and the rest of us lowly folk on the bottom, that's about to upturn itself. But
Mhm.
before it upturns itself, the oligarchs on top are going to double down, which is what's happening right now. In order for us to recalibrate and reharmonize and align with the new civilization that's coming in, which will be more architecturally designed around a mandala, where all of us understand that we are in a decentralized network where we all have we all have innate power and dignity,
Mhm.
and we all have a role to play. That's one archetype. Another one is discernment. Why is that important? Because we are going to live through a time period where we are going to be assaulted by deep fake everywhere. We will never know for sure the truth. And if we only use our intellectual capacities, we will be outsmarted by technologies and by bad actors.
Hmm.
And so we have to trust something. We have to train and trust something deeper inside of us, the wisdom eye, the third eye of intuition that can discern between augmented reality and virtual reality and propaganda and all of that stuff. Anyway, what I'm trying to say, and the other one is dignity. There's this idea that we have lost our humanity. If you just look at the geopolitical situation between Israel and Palestine, I mean, it's an absolute travesty of both are losers on all sides, and we have no solutions because we're completely looking at it in a binary way. One's right and one's wrong.
Hmm.
And this is the same with our political system in the United States. We're being played. We're absolutely being played. What we're forgetting is that we have to work on ourselves. You don't like the leadership? Work on yourself. You think that everything is corrupt? Become more moral. You think that it's all disharmonized? Find small pockets where you can harmonize and try to keep your own equilibrium. Stop outsourcing. Bring back the responsibility right to your own body and to your own local sphere of influence. And so just to wrap this up, because it's long-winded and I'm sorry for that, but I get animated about these kinds of questions because I think they're important questions for all of us because we're all in this together and we're all experiencing the same disillusion of our civilization. And there's one message that came through in the book, and it's the one message I'm repeating here, is as we live into the thresholds of the new civilization, the most important thing that each of us can do is try to clean up our own mess and be
Mm.
as morally intact and morally upright as possible. And if that means other people cheat us, and if that means other people slap us on one face, the side of the face, if that means other people steal from us, we have to we have to go the higher road. And that's the energetic legacy that we will leave.
I love it. Amazing. I love this integrity, having the integrity and keeping that as your mantle for the future. The book's called Return with Elixir. My guest today has been Miles Neale. As we conclude, Miles, how do people use your book? How would you like to see them use the material in your book?
Well, okay, so the book is dense. It's 440 pages. It's not like going to be a linear read. In a way, if I'm not to be cheeky, but in a way, if you come away with this notion that there's some deeper wisdom inside of you, listen to that more than any book, including my own. Okay, if
Oh God, okay. Because there is a lot to cover in your book. You just did a brain dump in that book, which is great because we get a sense of where your own personal journey and your practice in seeing other people and their journey, which makes it even more of a must read and also very insightful. But again, would you suggest you just need to read through it or?
yeah, take your time with it. I mean, pick it up, look at the maps, start to see visually that we're on a cyclic journey together.
Right.
And also, it's particularly suited for people who feel the call, feel that buzz, feel they're symptomatic, feel that there's something, as they say, as Morpheus said in the first Matrix, he said, there's a thorn in the mind. If you're a listener and you're on your work wheel or you're on your bird path, a familiar path, but something underlying you and deep inside of you is stirring and recognizes there's a mismatch here. There's something that they're not telling us. There's something that's not apparent. There's a disturbance in the force, but you just can't quite get your hands wrapped around it. Then this book serves as a doorway and it gives you four doorways. You like cosmology, you can go through the largest map. You like mythopoetics and stories and narratives, you can go through the Campbell map. If you like psychology, you can go through the psychology portal of Jung. And if you like spirituality, you can go through the deep science of rebirth of the Tibetan tradition. And
Yeah.
if you're someone like your listeners who may go to Peru and they like shamanism or they like alchemy or they like this one, you can go through the universal map that we described together in our conversation of solve et coagula. And you can put yourself in the deepest understanding that there's must be a dissolution and a complete fragmentation in order for there to be a reclaiming and a renewal, and that we're right there on the cusp. We are right there on the cusp. So pivotal. So take your time with it. Trust your intuition with it. See as that it's its own pilgrimage. You have stories in there. You have Jung in there. Jung's breakdown to breakthrough. You have Christ's breakdown to breakthrough. You have Buddha's breakdown to breakthrough. You have my client's breakdown to breakthrough. Tell your son that a breakthrough is imminent because he's breaking down. Encourage him to keep going. Tell him that he's not crazy. Tell him that it's a mismatch for his society and his civilization, and that there are cultures that would understand him and validate him and support him through his. This is a vision quest. This is a long enduring vision quest without substance for him, and that he will be okay, and that he will be a contributor. And I want your son to know that. I want everybody listening to know that. And I want us to remember that we're all in this together, that the worst thing that we can do is fragment and feel absolutely lost in the corner of our mind. This is a time for us to come together. Yeah.
Yeah. Great stuff, Neil. Really pleasure having you on the program. We're going to have you back. How can people learn more about you? Give us your social media tags and perhaps upcoming pilgrimages that you're leading.
Okay. So, I mean, Miles Neale, Milesneale is my website, and all my tags, both on YouTube and on Instagram. Those are the only two that I use for social. My upcoming pilgrimages that I'm excited about. I will be leading a tour to Bhutan with my spiritual master, Geshe Tenzin Zopa, Tibetan master. We're going to Bhutan, to the power places and caves of Padmasambhava, to do tantric visualizations in these sacred caves and landscapes. That's in October. 2026 is a big year for me because you got me at the right time, Cliff. At the beginning of the show, I told you how valuable and important I think pilgrimages are. And so I'm pivoting out of one-on-one work, although I still do a little bit of it, into pilgrimages, leading pilgrimages as you do. I'm going to have 4 of them next year. One is to Java for conscious leadership. Java is in Indonesia, where they have these great temples and the largest mandala on the planet. We never get to talk about it, but since you do all the ancient civilizations, the Silandra dynasty built the biggest mandala on the planet in central Java. And I'll be doing visualizations there for conscious leadership, altruistic, training people how to become not just influencers, but agents of change. Then I'll be going to Japan, to the Camino Kodo trails, which are the sister trails of the Camino de Santiago in Spain. There are 2 pilgrimage routes, both 1,000 years old, that are World Heritage designated. And so I'll be going to Japan. I'll also be going to Sum Valley in the high Himalayas of Nepal with my teacher. And there's one other to Turkey, which is at the end of next year. I know a lot of people are going to Turkey because they like Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
I'm going actually with 2 other healers. So we're going to do a healing journey in Turkey. I'm going to have a Balinese alchemist and an Ayurvedic physician, and myself, a Buddhist psychologist, going to reanimate, not just look at these ancient sites. Okay. This may be one of the difference between my clinical background. I'm not a historian. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm a healer.
Right.
So I've collaborated with 2 other healers. We want to go to Turkey, and we want to go to places like Cappadocia and to Göbekli Tepe and to Pergamon, where they have the Asclepion. I know you had Sarah Janes on your show once, and I'm a big fan of Sarah Janes. She and I recently went to the Asclepion in Greece. I'll be going to the Asclepion in Pergamon, Turkey, and doing and reviving it with Tibetan healing techniques. So we're not just inviting travelers to look at the stone and to have awe about our ancient ancestors, but also to move forward. How do we reactivate these sites, Cliff? This is very
Exactly.
important. How do we reactivate them so that they're ready to initiate larger populations of people for the new world that's coming?
Yeah, I love that. Wow, you're busy next year. Fantastic. I wanted to ask you, do you have a YouTube channel with some of your
Yes.
talks?
Yeah.
So
All my talks are up there.
okay.
I did a whole free series of 12 lectures. They're long format lectures, so in the age of people liking 3 minutes, I don't have a lot of short form content. But I alert people to go find the Crucible. The Crucible was my 12-part lecture series, which is about the book. So if you want to do a study the book with me online for free, you go to my YouTube channel and you find the Crucible. It's a 12-part series. Yes, they're 2-hour long format, but they take you through all 4 maps. So I have 3
Yeah.
classes on the Yuga cycle. I have 3 classes on Jung, 3 classes on Campbell, and 3 classes on Tibetan Buddhism. And we do meditations together. We talk about the content. It's much more experiential. So I invite people to
Excellent.
join. Yeah.
The last question is, did you had your book published by Inner Traditions, and I love those guys. Did they have you read it through Audible? Are you on Audible?
I'm not on Audible, but Cliff, do me a favor and talk to people at talk to the people like
No,
the
you
Inner
got to put
Tradition.
this. You got to because you're great.
Don't tell me that. Tell them that. Be an advocate for me. I've asked
Oh
them. I would love to do my own voice on my own journey. I can't imagine somebody else doing that. I mean, it's so
well,
personal. My book is so personal. So Cliff, do me a
yeah.
huge favor. Do me a solid
Well, we'll
and try to
talk.
yeah.
Hey, Miles, fantastic having you on. Let's do it again.
I'd
And
love it.
it was really my pleasure meeting you. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, let me just say before you jump off, Cliff, thanks for all you do. I'm sorry I didn't have enough time to talk about you and all the wonderful things that you do. I know that your listeners already know that, but for me, I'm sincere in my aspirations and I feel very connected with you. We do similar things for the same purpose on the planet at a pivotal time. For that, I thank you.
All right, man. Cheers.